he makes a comment about how he has to clean up my mess. And then I just get hammered with Tanya Tucker at the bar.
Live from the Willie Nelson and Friends Museum Showcase in Nashville, Tennessee. It's Music is Funny. Musicians talking to comedians about music and comedy. With your hosts, Raelyn Nelson and Jonathan Bright.
I'm still smoking, I'm so high, I keep toking, I'm drunk, but I'm still drinking too.
Welcome back to Music is Funny. I am Raelyn Nelson.
And I'm Jonathan Bright from the Raelyn Nelson Band.
Do I need a hat?
Nah. We're back with another one of these fantastic and unnecessary.
Fantastic. You never can say the word unnecessary. I don't know why you don't.
Become a thing.
You should just stop saying it.
I should probably.
Let's try
unnecessary. There it is.
There it is. JB's 53 years old and can't say unnecessary, and yes, he is 53.
Anyway.
A Sarah Tiana.
Oh, hello. Hi.
Hi, Sarah. How's it going?
Hi, it's good. How are you? Hi.
Good. Can you hear me?
No. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We got it.
Okay.
I'm Raelyn, and this is my co-host and music partner, JB.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, JB. Hi.
Nice to meet you. It's good to hear a Southern accent on a comedian.
Yeah, you grew up in the South, and so did we. So, yeah.
Yeah. Where did y'all grow up?
Nashville.
Yeah, right here in Nashville.
Oh, right. Well, there you go. Yeah, I was just 3 hours south of there in Calhoun, Georgia. So like North Georgia, between Atlanta and Chattanooga, basically.
We have driven through there many times.
Yeah, we have a Nike outlet, so a lot of people stop by.
I think you have a Panera, maybe, too.
Oh, that might be new. Yeah, since I left. Yeah.
Well, we like to start off by asking, what is the first music you remember loving in Calhoun, Georgia?
Oh. Well, let's see. I think Randy Travis was the first songwriter that I really grew up with. My sister was in his fan club. She called him Wandy, Wandy Travis. And we went to see him in concert in where was it? Ocoee? No, it was up in Hiawassee, the North Georgia mountains. Like he was playing there, and we went camping up there one weekend. We were little. We must have been 7. I was probably 7 or 8. I'm 43 now, so this would have been in the 80s. Peak Randy, you know. And so we saw him, and I remember shaking his hand, because he let people come up and touch his hand on stage. It was a really small venue. And my dad always talks about seeing him play at the Nashville Palace, when he was still a dishwasher. So
cool. That's right.
Oh, is that?
We're actually connected to it right now.
Yeah, we're connected to the Nashville
Palace.
Palace.
I filmed a pilot there years ago. And I wanted to film it there because Randy Travis performed there. And they still had his check framed that he never picked up, his last check.
What was the pilot? Was it music based, or was that just a convenient background?
It was called Tonight Y'all. It was a late night talk show from Nashville.
Oh.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You don't remember that?
No.
No, nobody does. It didn't get picked up.
I remember Randy Travis on Matlock because I was homeschooled for a little bit, and Matlock would come on TBS, and 3 or 4 of them in the middle of the day, and I would watch him, and he was obsessed with Randy Travis. So he would come on and they would sit down and sing and play a whole song in the middle of this murder case that he was trying to figure out.
I remember I was writing on Still the King. I had gotten hired to write on Still the King for season 2 with Billy Ray Cyrus. And I ended up not being able to write on it because I was filming that Tonight Y'all pilot, and they ended up happening at the same time. But I remember Randy was on season 1, and that was so intriguing to me. That was that he was playing a version of himself who was oh no, maybe Billy Ray was portraying Randy. I don't know. He got in a car accident because he was drinking. I remember that. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it was based on Randy.
That's
I
so
don't know. I
Nashville.
remember him and Randy got in a fight or something. It doesn't matter, but yes.
So you started with Randy Travis, and I guess you were young then. What happens when you get into your teenage years? I'm sure you graduated from that into something else.
Yeah, so I mean, I was a big Alanis Morissette fan in high school, and like, Nirvana obviously was like big when I was in high school, because I was in high school from 92 to 96. So that was like that was when CDs had just come out.
Oh yeah.
And so I think my first CD was Jagged Little Pill. And so that was just like kind of all I really listened to in high school. And I really loved this band live.
Oh yeah.
And I remember seeing them with it was like live, Counting Crows, Aerosmith, Dave Matthews, stuff like that. And then I think by the time I left college, I just like got back into country music on the drive back to California from Georgia. And I moved there in 2001. And so I pretty much only listened to 80s and 90s country on Sirius XM. They have a channel called Prime Country. And like, I listen to that and sports talk radio and like true crime podcasts. That is like my music anthology.
Yeah,
So
I love 80s, 90s country.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit about going to college, but how do you get from Calhoun to Los Angeles? And I'm sure it wasn't immediately just to go do comedy.
In a car. That's how I went. I'm
Well
just kidding. Yeah. No, I went to college to be a journalism major, thinking I was going to work at CNN since that was in Atlanta. And then at UGA, I realized that you have to write the news. You can't just read off of a teleprompter. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And then I transferred to Georgia State because I was working at Six Flags over Georgia, performing in the kids shows. And then there was a country music show there as well. And I became friends with a lot of the people there because a lot of them went to Belmont and Nashville, and they would like siphon through. You did? Okay. Yep. See, so we had a lot of people coming through there. And then the Atlanta music scene was pretty happening at the time because John Mayer was there at the time. I can remember going and watching him and then like watching, but then I also worked for Album 88 at Georgia State, which was the biggest college radio station in the country, student run. And so I met like all these cool artists like Dido before she came out. Like they had started like Arrested Development. They had started REM, like all these Athens bands and like Indigo Girls. Like I went to go see them really young. And so anyway, I was like really into the radio station, and they had me start doing the news on the radio station because I was like, journalism major, and I kept making jokes, and they were like, you can't make jokes when you're talking about the news. And I was like, well, then I don't want to do it. And then they were like, well, you could do the entertainment news. And so I started doing entertainment news, and that turned into becoming a film major. And then I took my first real acting class in college, and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. Dang it. And so I studied theater in Paris in college. And then after that, it was like, well, I'm moving to Los Angeles to be an actress. And then when I moved to LA, everyone was like, you're so funny, you should do stand-up. And I was like, no one's ever told me I was funny. Like people would always be laughing at things that I said, but they'd be like, that's not funny. That's not funny. Because I was really sarcastic. And you know how the South doesn't understand sarcasm. So, I didn't realize I was funny until I moved to LA. And then I also didn't realize I had an accent until I moved to LA because I was born in Northern California. We moved to Georgia when I was 5. And so everyone always called me a Yankee, even though California wasn't in the war. I don't know why I call it the war. But anyway, so I was really confused. And then when I moved to LA, everyone's like, you're such a redneck. And I was like, oh, I've wanted to be a redneck my whole life. Like nobody's ever told me I even had an accent. So anyway, I moved to LA, and a couple of years later, I started stand up on a dare after like enough people had told me to do it. And now I'm on your show.
You've made it finally.
Yeah.
So you didn't have as a kid or anything, any design on acting or anything. That came way late. It sounds like to you, like this.
Oh yeah. Well, I had done plays and stuff growing up. My mom and my dad is a carpenter or on the side, and my mom was a seamstress on the side. They both had real jobs, but like my dad would build all the sets and my mom would make all the costumes. So I was in plays, but I never thought it was something that you could just do. Like growing up in Calhoun, people would be like, "Oh, Sarah, you're such a great actress. You'd make a great dental hygienist." So like no one says you should move to LA. Like no one says that in a small town, So I didn't even know that was an option. And then I didn't even know when I moved to LA that stand-up was just something anybody could do. I thought like you could do stand-up after you had a sitcom. I didn't realize it was the other way around. Because like in college, I interviewed Mitch Hedberg we had a little radio show on Friday afternoons, and we would interview all these comedians that came through the Punchline. And Mitch was the first person that ever gave me tickets to a comedy show. So that was the first comedy show I'd ever seen. And like, people like, "Oh, is that when you decided to be a stand-up?" I'm like, you don't watch Mitch Hedberg and then go, "Oh, I could do that." I was just like, I have no idea how that works. And I just moved on. And so when people started telling me I could do it, I just didn't even know the process. Like, how does one do that? And, then they're like, "Well, you just write jokes and do open mics." And so I was watching the news in LA one day. I saw a news story. It made me think of a joke. I wrote it down, looked up where an open mic was, and then the rest is kind of history. That first joke worked.
That's great. Talking about, I miss college radio stations because I grew up around that era too. And I bet you got a lot of free tickets for all the cool bands that were coming through town, the indie bands and all that stuff, since you were the entertainment person. And fuck, Mitch Hedberg, first comedy. It's like seeing the Beatles almost right out of the chute. You've never seen rock and roll. Wow.
Yeah, Mitch Hedberg, when he was still like touring, like before he got super famous, like probably his first album had just come out. Like it was really early on, and lots of, very cool bands that I probably could never name now because I don't know if they're still around, but yeah, like I got to see all kinds of, like Atlanta had so many cool venues.
Oh yeah.
So there were all kinds of different places to go. So you were always out watching live music and stuff. It was really fun.
I don't know if people still, we've talked about this. Do people get out as, early 20s like they used to watch live music? Because growing up in Nashville, it's the same way. There were a bunch of different clubs, and that's what we did. Is just everybody went out and watched bands. And I don't know, it didn't seem like the kids are doing that as much. Maybe they're just watching them on the computer. But man, going to see a live band in a small club is the greatest thing in the world.
Oh, for sure. I could tell you as a stand-up, people definitely don't come out as much as they used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Made it too easy just to sit home.
Okay, so what was the first comedian? Did you like stand-up comedy when you were a kid at all?
No, I mean, I didn't realize that I did because like Roseanne was probably my favorite TV show growing up. I didn't know that she was a stand-up.
Yeah, me either.
So like, I didn't know Ellen was a stand-up, like Paula Poundstone, and I can remember seeing them perform on stage on videos and stuff, or like I would see like a commercial for it. But I just thought that was because they had a sitcom. So they were doing some sort of other show. Does that make it just never registered. Like my parents didn't watch it. It's not like we had HBO. So I wasn't one of those kids that was watching Eddie Murphy Raw when I was little. Like we didn't have any of that growing up. I mean, we had videos that we would rent and I would watch movies all the time, but I never watched any stand up.
Yeah. And it's kind of, I guess it's been that way almost forever. You think about like Sanford and Son, Red Fox was a comedian, the Jeffersons, Sherman Hemsley, they all, I guess, as a kid, you never think about them being comedian. It was years before I found out Red Fox was actually a stand-up. And then you realize he's bringing all of his buddies on the show. So it's probably changed a bit of a comedian's goals. I guess back then it was do stand-up so I can get a sitcom or and really, blow up that way. But it seems like nowadays it's been so neutered on TV that sitcom might not be the greatest route for a young comic to even think, or they might. Do you even think about that? Maybe you did because it was still kind of that crossover time, but.
Yeah, I think it was like always something that you thought about at the beginning. And then when the opportunity actually hits you, you're like, oh, what am I actually going to write about? I think as a stand-up, like you're conditioned to think that like nothing about you is interesting. And that's how I always felt. But maybe I'm sure there are plenty of other stand-ups that don't think like that. That's why they have TV shows. But I think it definitely was a route. I also think back in the 90s, like in the big heyday of stand-up,
right,
the 80s and 90s, like you could make a living just having one sitcom. You could make a living being a guest star on a sitcom 5 times a year back in the 80s. Now, like you couldn't survive doing it 5 times a month, Mm-hmm. So like, just because like the way residuals work and the way like that. So like now you just kind of have to really hustle, and live shows become a thing, podcasts become a thing. It's all just about becoming like creating constant working environments. And for me, it became the route of writing. And so I started writing for the roast, like, I don't know, like 8, 9 years, like 10 years ago, whatever it's been. And so I got into like this little niche of writing, and then like that turned into like sports and country music. And like, so my niche is like, if it's country music, sports, or the military, I'm your girl. If it's anything else, you might want to ask someone else, And so that just kind of became my niche. Like that became like my group of people that I like worked with the most.
So how did you get into the roast scene? Like, how did that come about?
So I was running a room. So like when you started stand up, you started open mics, and then you start doing bringer shows, which you'll kind of get better laughs at, but you have to bring like 10 people, and then you can get like 7 minutes or whatever. And then your friends stop wanting to come to the shows because they're sitting through horrible shows when you're terrible and new, and everybody else on the show is terrible and new. So then you start running your own room, and that's how you can kind of trade for time. So it's like, you can do my show, but I can do your show. And then you can also, I ended up being really lucky that I was running a really cool room, like this old warehouse in LA. And it was $5 to get in, and you got free Bud and Bud Light all night.
Wow.
And so comics would come, and they would have to pay, but they would just come to hang out. And so Jeff Ross started coming and like running roast jokes. And this was early on. This was probably this was before Sheen and before Trump. So it must have been, I can't even remember who it must have been early on, but it was probably Larry the Cable Guy and stuff like that. So anyway, he would come and practice all these jokes. And then I saw him out, and I was like, what's the next roast you're doing? And he was like, oh, Quentin Tarantino is like this charity event. And I said, what's your email? And he gave it to me. And then I just sent him jokes all day, every day, until he couldn't forget about me, and until he couldn't ignore me anymore.
He finally relented.
And then he finally invited me over to his house with like a couple of his other friends who were writers who would help him. And they had been trying to figure out like the opening joke, and I tagged it right away. And it's the one he used. It was the first thing he said on the Sheen roast. And then I started writing for him. And then right after that, he got his own TV show on Comedy Central. He asked me to write on it, and boom, I was in the door. And then once you get that foot in the door, you just do not relent. You don't get out.
So you talked about like running your own room. Was it kind of like bands where, we would be playing, say in Knoxville, we have a following there, and somebody has a following in Memphis, and you swap gigs with bands that have the following? Like, were there different sections of fans, or was it the same people that came to both rooms, like you and another comic? Or were there certain like segments you could get in front of other people if you went and did their show, and you could put them in front of people who maybe hadn't seen them? For sure. It's exactly like that. You're always in front of a new crowd, because the thing about running a room is like you wanted to run it in a place that either had a lot of foot traffic. So someplace like Hollywood Boulevard or Sunset, where there's like tourists walking around, or a cool niche room that locals would come to if there was incentive, like $5 beer all night. So, so before it was like bars and restaurants, but you were always going to be in front of a new crowd. But I think the incentive for a comic wasn't just a new crowd. It was like a crowd that was listening, because at an open mic, like no one's listening. They're just like writing their own stuff down, or we've heard
waiting to go up. Yeah.
A bunch of angry comedians or upstart comedians with their arms crossed working on this while you're telling jokes.
Yeah.
It's like
so until you
in Nashville.
Yeah. And then you eventually like become paid regular at a real club that does all the promoting, and you start getting paid. And like, so then I became a paid regular at the Comedy Store, and then I didn't really have to do that anymore.
So I'm curious as to when you're writing these roast jokes and other people are telling them, I'm sure it's fun writing them, but was there ever a point where you're like, why the fuck can't I get up and tell these jokes? Like, did you kind of go, that's a good one, I don't necessarily want to give that one up, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's what makes me a generous writer, is that I don't want to do it. I'm more, I get more excited about adapting to someone's voice and then writing for them. I could definitely do it myself. Like I started doing the roast battle. It took a lot of arm twisting before I would actually go up and do the jokes myself. And that's when I learned that I was capable of it. But I find that it's a real artwork to get into the brain of a comedian and then write in their voice, you know? So I was able to do that with Jeff Ross, and I was able to do that with David Spade. And then, you know, most recently I just worked on Kevin Hart and Snoop Dogg's show for the Olympics. So getting into their brain, it's like, it's a new challenge. So for me as a writer, I thought that just ended up being really fun for me.
So do you ever get stuck on a section where you're just doing a bunch of writing and going, fuck, I want to get back out and do some stand-up, or vice versa? Like we kind of do the same thing about, I want to go play live. Like I'm ready to go record. Whatever you're doing, you're kind of like, I'm kind of getting tired of this. I want to go back and do this for a while.
Yeah, every once in a while, like you do a show and you're like, oh, that's really fun. But I don't miss certain aspects. Like I don't miss the grind of like going to Lexington for 5 days and like hustling and like trying to do radio every morning to promote my show, and then like 100 people showing up instead of 200, and like the stress of that and like the travel. I don't miss that. It's being on stage I love, but it's all the other stuff around getting to the stage that makes it more difficult the older you get, I think. Yeah. And it just pays 3 times as much to be a writer. So you're like, right. Why wouldn't I just like stay here and have a pension and a retirement and have just as much fun and get to see Kevin Hart every day?
There you go. Yeah. So when you were working the road, we always talk to like female. What's it like? Did you travel with somebody? I'm sure you went with openers and stuff, but what's it like being a female out doing the road, you know, solo?
I mean, I didn't bring my own openers. I usually just, I would kind of make selections from different openers that the club would give me options, you know, and I usually took men because they would always try to give, like they would put, when I was early on, they would always put another woman on the show or something like that because they wanted to make it like a girl show. And I'm like, you know, like I need a lot of diversity. Like if I'm talking about being a single woman, I need there to be a guy talking about being married, like just so everybody feels balanced in the audience. Everybody feels like their voice is being heard. To me, it was always about creating balance on stage. I never really found it difficult to be a woman on the road, other than just like, I mean, it's kind of lonely, but you know, I always felt a little bit more less stressed because when I was in LA, I always had so many meetings and so much stuff to do. And then when you're on the road, you're like, oh, I could just like go to the gym and take a nap because I don't have anything to do. Yeah, literally. It was before Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my favorite part about being on the road is the hotel time. It's nice that you just don't do anything. There's nothing to do because you're not at home and you can't, you know, find projects that need to be done or whatever.
Yeah. And now when I go on the road, I just open for super famous people. So I go on the road the way they go on the road, which is way nicer than I ever. So I kind of like prefer that. And then I only have to do 15 minutes. I still, you know, get my practice in and get it out of my system. But until I'm preparing for like a new special or something, there's no real reason for me to go out there and put together a new hour, I don't think.
And you could just go down to the Comedy Store and talk your stuff there. What was it like the first time you performed at the Comedy Store?
Oh, it was not fun. It was always when I first started there, let's see, I probably started there in 2004. I didn't get past until 2009 because you couldn't work there as a girl at the time, as a woman. Because Mitzi, like, bless her heart, she did a lot for comedy, but she held me back more than any other woman in the business. But she was a genius and she knew what she was doing. And by the time I was passed, it was the right time for me to be passed. It just took me a lot longer because I couldn't work the door or the phones. Like now all those policies have changed. And the Comedy Store is a really wonderful, loving community that is like my family. When I first started, it was really difficult though. It was really tough room, but it made you really good. And so you really had to work hard in every room. So I started in the belly room upstairs. And then eventually when I got passed, you were in the OR and the original room, which was downstairs. And then there's the main room, which at the time was only open once a week. And now it's like 4 or 5 days a week, 2 shows a night sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, but Steve Simone said it took him 8 years and he worked every job in the fucking club. So, poor guy.
Yeah. See, when you're nice, like me and Steve, you're like people just don't pay as much attention to you. It's like the people who are mean and yell and go, I deserve this. And apparently they tend to. Yeah, I'm not a squeaky wheel.
It really is bizarre to hear everybody's story about how and when they got passed. Because who are we just talking to that just went right through?
Oh, Justin Martindale.
Justin Martindale. Yeah.
7 months or something in the game, period.
Oh, yeah.
We could just talk to Steve Simone. I'm like, holy shit, that's 7 months and 8 fucking
drastic
years,
difference.
Man.
Yeah.
It was him and a girl named Damian Merlina, who both of them got passed super fast, like their first time they showcased for Mitzi. And we were all like, what? But they were really good. So, I mean, it's just different, you know? And also Justin has like a totally different vibe than most of the comics that were working there, as well as Damien. So it was like, yeah, I mean, I get it. You know, they're doing something different. It makes you work a little bit harder and look back at your material and go like, oh, yeah, I'm just doing exactly what everyone else is doing. I don't have my own voice yet.
Yeah, and he mentioned Robin Williams was a big influence on him, right?
Yeah.
And that makes sense now because apparently that's kind of the way Robin Williams rolled into the story. Everybody like, what the fuck is going on? Now, Robin Williams, maybe I'm not trying to equate them both, but it's kind of the same thing. You know what I mean?
Justin Martindale's the new Robin Williams.
He might be. You never know.
I mean, he's very fun.
Better hair.
He's got great hair. It's very fun.
Okay, so I did see some of that Snoop and Kevin Hart thing, and it was great. My friend Daisy showed it to me, and I got to meet Snoop Dogg in Nashville in like 2010, and he called me the grandbaby because I clearly got to go to the show because of my grandpa, and he had done a couple songs together and things. But he called me the grandbaby twice, and he hugged me like side hug, you know, and he was so tall and like lanky. And I just wanted to like, you're so cool, Snoop Dogg. It was like the only thing I could say.
Well, I'm curious. I'm curious about Raelyn hates sports, but how did you parlay? How did you ease into how did you ease into like country music and sports and get your toe into both those? I mean, everybody's looking for somebody funny, but how did that work out? Because you've done a bunch with both of those.
Yeah, I've done a lot. Well, with sports, it was just knowledge, you know, like I think I started really putting it out there that like, you know, when it came to the roast, I was always the one like writing the sports jokes whenever there were athletes on the roast. And I remember, I think I was there was 2 women on the Rob Lowe roast. And I was the only one that knew anything in the whole room out of 16 writers about football. And Peyton Manning was on the show. And I was like, and they were like, we're not going to do any football jokes. And I go, what? Just because you guys don't know how to write them? Like, we're not going to have Peyton Manning on the show and not let him talk about football. Like, are you insane? So anyway, I had to push and shove. And then it just became like, oh, I'm starting to write for Peyton. And then I got my foot in the door at the ESPYs with a friend there who also was writing on
that's the sports awards on ESPN, just so you know.
I'm thinking about what I'm going to wear tomorrow. I'm zoned out.
Yes. I'll talk to you about country music in 2 seconds. So like, it just became like, oh, I started working with these other writers that worked on sports shows. And, you know, when you're a woman and you can write sports jokes and you know a lot about sports, which, it's all about references. So it's all like any joke is about references. When you're writing a roast joke, it's like who just died that we can use as a reference point. Like I remember on the James Franco roast, I wrote a joke for Jeff Ross that he ended up trying to retake, but like it didn't make the show. So I was like, oh, I get to keep it. But it was right after James Gandolfini died. And whenever someone has passed away, the stakes are really high. It makes the joke a little bit harder, right? Yeah. Anytime you've risen the stakes, it's why Die Hard is a technically Christmas movie, right? Because if it's not Christmas, there's no stakes. So anyway, it was like, James Franco, you're an insult to Italian actors everywhere. James Gandolfini must be trying to roll over in his grave right now. So that joke works because it's current. He passed away. It's a fat joke, whatever. And then you can just kind of switch that around for other fat people that die whenever that happens. So anyway, with sports, I was able to always use those references. And so when you're writing jokes and you have a reference point that other sports fans know and understand, that's where it works. And it was the same with country music. Like I always knew a lot of references because I knew a lot about the artists. And when I had first started stand-up, I was waiting tables at the Four Seasons Hotel in Beverly Hills at the pool. And John Rich came in, and him and Kenny, and it was right when Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy came out. And they were, and John heard my accent and he's like, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Georgia. And he said, are you an actress? I said, no, I'm a comedian. And he said, I love comedy. And I said, I know, you ordered a Chardonnay. And then I just walked away. And then he thought that was really funny. And then asked, if I had any material that he could see. And I like snuck it to his room through the concierge the next day. He called me 12 hours later and was like, can you write jokes about country music artists? And I was like, oh yeah, I do that all the time. I had never written like one. And I sent him a joke every day for a year so that he wouldn't forget about me. And, John and I don't see eye to eye on everything, but we see eye to eye on business. And he's an incredible businessman, very smart, and he loved the work ethic. So he started flying me to Nashville to perform at his parties at his house.
Yeah.
And so for probably 8 years, I performed in Nashville once or twice a year before I ever performed at Zany's. I was always performing at his house.
Oh, shit. The fancy.
And so that's how that's how I met everybody. Well, not everybody. That's how I met a lot of people. And then how I had had started gathering this like treasure trove of jokes based on like all the artists that I'd written about. And I remember Kix Brooks was like one of the first people so basically John brought me out to perform at his 31st birthday party or something. And like everybody was there. That was when, people still loved him. And so they were all there and I see Kix Brooks and I'm like, oh, Kix, huge fan. Yeah. But I can never remember which one is Brooks, which one is Dunn, which one has the mustache, which one doesn't, which one actually tames the white tigers and which one doesn't do magic at all. I always forget. Right. And like, it's just silence, right? This is also me roasting before I knew what roasting was. This is like before Jeff Ross, before everything. Like I had just started stand up. I didn't know what I was doing. And so everyone's quiet. And like, I was like, did you not think that was funny? And he goes, no. I mean, there's like 250 people here. And I'm like, well, maybe I didn't tell it right. I'll tell it again. Right. And so I do the joke again. And then I tag it. I go, well, it's just easy to remember y'all are lovers because you can't spend 20 years together and not at least make out on the red dirt road. And then that was like it. Like I just bomb. Like it didn't matter what I did. I mean, doing jokes like Faith Hill's there. I'm like making jokes about her. Like everyone, like the band starts playing cricket noises on the keyboard. Everybody, like the table to my left, the guys that are like John's friends and John in the back with Granny, they are dying laughing. Everybody else is like this, right?
Wow, what a strange place to bomb in, too.
Yeah, Brian McKnight goes up after me. He like him and John wrote this song like one, you're like a dream come true or whatever. And he makes a comment about how he has to clean up my mess, and then I just get hammered with Tanya Tucker at the bar.
Wait, John Rich wrote that song with Brian?
Yeah, you know he's written so many songs. It's like
I didn't know he wrote that one.
Yeah, he wrote that one too.
Okay.
It's Nashville,
So
man.
then I think,
In for a word, in for a third, as they say.
yeah. He does that cool thing too, where he'll have the artist write out the lyrics of their song and then autograph it. That's like my favorite thing that he does at his house. So he has all these wonderful songs written out, handwritten out, like George Jones will like write out a song and then like autograph it.
So was this bombing the first time you went there?
Yes, really bad. Like, oh yeah, kept getting invited back to the point where then I started doing the roast at Zany's during the Nashville Comedy Festival. It was like a charity that was who put it on? I forget which charity, but like the first time it was Allie Harnell, and then it was like always these like big like Nashville record executives. And the guy that's the manager for Zach Brown used to always like head it up, and like they would hire me to come out and just like roast everybody. And then it would be like, Dirk Bentley would be there. And like, I can remember him heckling me because I was like talking about how he didn't write any of his songs or whatever. And then he was like, fuck you. And I was like, oh, you can't even write that. That's not even like an original thing. I would just make fun of everybody. And then I see Kix again. And I tell him that story. And I tell the joke again. And he thinks it's hilarious. And like, now him and I are really good friends.
So basically,
it comes full circle.
Yeah,
it's like, it's about the way you tell the joke. It's not always the joke. It's the confidence behind the joke.
So you basically just got rehired to do everything you did when you bombed.
Mm-hmm. Yep, pretty much. And then I started doing really well at it. Well, yeah, because I didn't care anymore.
And they, stars can be a bit tight-assed. So I consider, they don't catch a lot of shit.
They're used to hearing. That's why roast the celebrities are great, because all we see is just them, people gushing over them. And that's all they hear. Gifts and.
But that's my favorite thing, is to see somebody getting roasted and see them genuinely laughing at it. And like, okay, I like this person. Because if you can't laugh, and like me and my friends, it's the roast thing. Like the funniest ones, even when it's on you, is when it stings just a little bit. And you're like, oh man, that stings, but that's fucking funny. It's almost hard to laugh at because you're like, God, you nailed me uncomfortably. Yeah,
those are the ones that hurt the most, where you're like, do you believe that? Do you think that's true? Right. That's when you're like, I can remember Mike Lawrence one time wrote a joke about me because I always did well on the roast because people would just make fun of me, like call me a whore the whole time. And I'm like, if you knew anything, like that doesn't hurt my feelings. Like I'm a prude. Like I can hold up like all my partners in less than 2 hands, So like, and then he said like, Sarah's such a prude. She doesn't even put out new material. And I was like, like, is that true? Do I not? Do people think that? Like, that's the only one that I've ever heard that I was like, that made me pause.
But you almost have to be like, well done, sir. Well done.
Yeah. Oh no, totally. I mean, when I write a roast joke, my goal is to not hurt your feelings. My goal is to impress you. My goal is to like make you wish you had written that joke about yourself. Yeah. That's why it works better with comics, Country music artists are usually a little bit more fun. And like the whole thing with a roast is like, you also get to go up there and tell jokes about other people too. It's not like people are just saying jokes about you and you don't get to say anything back. Of course, at John's birthday party, that was not the case.
But you get to go say something back with a whole team of writers providing you with material. Right. Like you get everybody's best jokes to go back at all the comedians.
Yeah.
So if you can take it, you at least get your.
And I think we like roast so much too, or me personally, because I am not the person to talk shit to someone, I'll talk shit about somebody to my close friends, but I don't want to be mean to anyone. I never would want to make anyone feel sad or hurt. So I love it when you guys are doing it, because it's like, this is so great. You get to see this happening, and it impresses me so much. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, you never want to do anything about someone that's like so personal that it would like actually hurt their feelings. You do jokes around them. You don't do it about something specific, usually.
You ever had anybody come at you afterwards, like do any of those roasts going, hey man,
anybody pissed?
Nope. No. Well, no, some people really butt hurt that they got their ass beat by a girl, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Just just like,
what
sad.
About like when people have just died any of their family? Well, obviously the people who just died didn't come back and get mad at you, but like their family or something.
No, I remember on the Bieber roast that we had to pull all the jokes about Paul Walker because he had passed and Ludacris was on that roast and he was like really upset. So I remember there were like a few jokes about how like old Martha Stewart was. She needed a walker more than the Fast and the Furious franchise or something. I think Natasha did that joke and we had to pull those jokes. And so we're like if that's something that somebody's really affected by, you know, then the roast complies. But as a writer, I'm gonna usually, you know, go after, like, there's always stuff that you don't want to talk about that you're like, well, that's really not funny, right. You know, and you definitely don't want to do jokes about people who aren't there. And I think in that case, you're like, yeah, I mean, obviously he's not here, so
yeah.
I heard Louis C.K. say something one time years ago, but he made some joke about Eric Clapton's kid falling to his death or whatever, you know, it's been that long. Oh, yeah. But somebody got mad about it and they came up to him like, if that was your son, would you want me making fun of it? And he goes, no, absolutely not. But that doesn't mean it's not funny. He's like, of course I wouldn't want you to do that, but that doesn't mean it's still not funny. And I was like, you know, that's a good point, really.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be the one doing those jokes, you have to be okay with the repercussions. So like, you know, it's just, it's up to the comfort level of the comic telling them. Like we present them with all kinds of jokes and honestly, you never know what people are going to like. Like I can remember for the Alec Baldwin roast, I wrote all these jokes about, for Robert De Niro, but he had his own person. And so like, they all just got put into a bank. Like what happens is you go in and you start writing jokes about everybody. And then the head writer selects the ones they like and they go into a bank. And then when you start writing scripts for people, you pull jokes from the bank and then you add your own to make them flow. And so Robert De Niro goes up and he starts doing jokes and I'm like, oh, I had no idea. And that's just like, I think it was mostly like, oh, I'm just here to teach Chris Redd and Blake Griffin how to fuck black women or something. It's like all about his black wife. And I had no idea. Like, you never know what Robert De Niro is going to like. How do I know what jokes he's going to like? So those are just like cases where you're just like kind of proud of yourself, but also shocked.
So is it a writer's room when you're doing that? Like you're all together, or is it submission like everybody, or maybe you can get together? Like, do you guys schedule time to get together and write jokes for something like that?
Yeah, we are hired and we come in every day because we also, you know, early on, it's a 2 to 3 week process, you know, where you know who we're roasting, but then like a lot of times the people come in and out, like people pull out, like, as soon as they see a first draft, sometimes they're fucking gone, right? So you just never know. And then you have, like, I knew we were really worried about that with Caitlyn Jenner when she did Alec Baldwin. And then she wanted like harder ones. We were like, oh my God. Like, so you just never know. Like you think people are gonna be worried and then like sometimes they go harder, or you think people are gonna love it and then they get offended by everything. So you just never know. But yes, it is a writer's room. We all come in once we go like, oh, it's Martha Stewart's on, you know, so we all just start writing Martha Stewart jokes basically.
It's strange. I've never really thought about the process. It's a strange, it's almost like writing for a TV show, but it is for writing for a TV show, but yeah, at the same time.
And then once your brain gets into that habit, are you just like roasting everyone you see around you, you know, just coming up with.
Or maybe you do that all the time.
Yeah, maybe if your brain's just
silently
there,
roasting.
You know?
Yeah, I think your brain does get into that mode a little bit, but you really have to like weave it, you know, like with Spade is like not really a roaster. He's more like, he'll make fun of himself more than he will other people. So like, then you have to train your brain to like write jokes about him, but you're like, is he gonna like this? Is he gonna think I really think this about him? You know what I mean? Like, so like, it's like this really touch and go, like where you kind of push and then pull back and push and pull back. And you just don't really know what people are gonna like. So yeah, I don't know. It's always different.
Completely off topic. How do you feel about your new football coach in Atlanta? He came from here.
I know.
And we got Julio Jones, so it's almost like a swap there.
It is
Raelyn,
very interesting. It makes me wonder what he knows, because if he's so willing, as the old offensive coordinator for Tennessee, if he's so willing to give them an offensive weapon, he must know that they have no way of like making use of him. Like that just would be my impression.
Probably.
But I think he's really cool. I think it's always cool when someone who's super rich still works.
That's
because
the craziest
they just love it. Yeah.
This guy's dad is like, the guy that made up FedEx. He's the inventor of FedEx.
Yeah.
He just came up through the ranks as a football coach, living, you know, he dresses like a slob. He doesn't go for it. Just straight football all the time. And yeah, you got a good one.
Yeah. Like worked his way up from the ground, like basically like handing out towels, like worked his way up when he could have just like bought a team.
Won't do any interviews or any of that. Hates to talk about anything about himself. Yeah, you got a good one.
I know. I'm pretty excited about him, but you know, as you can see, I have my Falcons shirt on, so
notice that. Yes,
always representing. Yeah,
there you go.
So, when is the first time that you remember hearing about my grandpa?
Well, I mean, I definitely grew up. I mean, every time we were on a road trip, my dad played on the road again. I mean, and he still thinks it's funny. I mean, he still thinks it's funny. I see where you get your comedic
talent from, clearly from your father.
He definitely thinks that's where I get my comedy from, but it's usually my mom. Like my dad is like really loud and like he drinks a lot of beer. He has one dance, you know what I mean? Like he is very funny and observant, but like he will tell you setups, you know, but he doesn't know the punch, you know.
Right.
He'll be like, I think they should make Michael Jackson black again or something. And you're like, what? What? Is there a follow-up to that? You know, like, no, nothing. He's like, you know. And I'm like, no, I don't know. Like, what are you talking about? And like, but my mom is like really like super observant and more like sly. Like she'll say something that you're just like, what? You know, like my mom would come in, you know, if like we had the TV turned up too loud, like she'd come in and she'd be like, girls, I think it's just so great that y'all have the TV up so loud because our neighbors do not have the money for cable. And I'm so glad that y'all are letting them hear the TV, you know, because they can't watch it themselves. You know, we'd be like, oh, you know, like we know, like turn it down.
You got a little bit of roast in her too, it sounds like.
Yeah. So like she was just like really like, she would say things that just made you go like, all right, you know? So anyway, well, so I grew up with Willie and my dad. My dad was the one that liked country. My mom was more of a pop person, but she did like trio, like Anne Murray and Dolly and all of them. So I grew up listening to Dolly with both of them. And like we went to Dollywood when I was a kid and we would go to Nashville. My dad just loved like country music from that heyday. So Willie was like part of it. And like I just always love the stories about I feel like when it comes to Willie, like I just think of like resilience in country music. And like I always feel like he's so different. Like to me, him and Dolly are like these two iconic like rebels in country music who are like, everybody's going one way, but I'm just going to smoke weed and not pay my taxes and like do shows and do whatever the fuck I want. And like, I don't care. And it was like, I loved that outlaw country aspect of everybody. I always liked who he would do songs with. They were always unpredictable and like fun and catchy. I think that's the greatest thing about country music is that it's easy to memorize. It's easy to catch on to. Mm-hmm. And when I was running my room at the, that comedy room that I met Jeff Ross in, that's also, we would do this jam afterwards where like all the comedians are a lot of band nerds. So they play a lot of instruments. And this guy, Chris Porter, really great comic, who's also a really great guitar player. He actually is really best friends with the Black Crowes. So he like goes on tour with them all the time. And we would do a jam after the show with all the comics, and I would always sing City of New Orleans because it was like my favorite Willie Nelson song. Mm-hmm. And I could not carry a tune, but I tried and I loved that song. So that was
I like that song too. That's a good one of his.
I've tried 3 times to see him in concert, and I've missed every single
What?
time. Yeah, 3 different times. I was supposed to go, or like something happened, and like either a show or like just life got in the way, or I couldn't get tickets, because I was too poor or something. So
Yeah.
I still have to go see him. It's not like he's on tour every day.
Yeah. He is back on tour now though. What, you're in LA?
I'm in Los Angeles. Yeah. I've tried to see him at the LA Fairgrounds like twice.
I think he's supposed to be at the Hollywood Bowl in October there, so I'll see if I can.
I'll be there. I'll put it in my calendar now. It's not like concerts for me are like something, it's not the first thing I think about. And then I see that they're here and it's like too late.
Yeah.
I went to see Dolly, and that was like the best comedy show I'd ever been to, 'cause she's so funny. But Willie's definite bucket list for me.
We'll edit out the part where you were talking about possibly getting her tickets.
Yeah, please. I don't want everyone thinking that like.
No. I wouldn't. I would never.
I told Ryan Sickler I would get him some too, so maybe you and Ryan can go together.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, I love that. The Hollywood Bowl. I used to live right next to the Hollywood Bowl. It's my favorite venue. And then when I was opening for Brad Paisley, we actually performed there. So I got to perform at the Hollywood Bowl, which is kind of like one of the coolest. It's like something like people are like, oh, you could check that off your bucket list. And I'm like, that was never on my bucket, like
right. Well,
it's not something that you'd think.
Brian said that he would be at the Hollywood Bowl, and I thought it was a football game.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, is that a football? Oh, is it? And he goes, no, and he pulled it up on the phone and showed it to me. And, but yeah, I thought it was a football game and that Papa Willie was like playing the halftime show.
Like I said, Sarah,
it's not that far off because it's the Super Bowl, Rose Bowl. See, I know things.
Yeah, no. If he was playing the halftime of a football game, I would also go to that.
Sarah, you're awesome. Thank you for doing this with us. It's hard to get female comedians to come on here, so thank you so much. Yeah,
thanks for asking me. This is really cool. It's so nice to meet both of y'all.
Yeah, next time you come through Nashville, let us know.
Yeah.
I will. I love that town. It's one of my favorite places in the world.
It's getting full.
I know. I promise I won't move there too.
Thanks again, Sarah.
All right. Thanks, JB. Thanks, Raelyn. Bye.
Sarah Tiana is my favorite comedian.
She was great. I love the Southern accent.
I know. It was funny because she would, I could just listen to her talk all day and then she would say something really funny out of nowhere.
I know. Nothing funnier than a Southern accent from a funny person.
She's great. Y'all go check out all of her stuff and check out Rushmore Podcast and History Buffs with those people we know.
Yeah. I know your mother's name.
Yeah, don't be an asshole.
Enjoy your groceries.
And we freed Brittany.